Chris with Airstream Wanderings. Thanks for joining me today. Today what I'm going to do is show the process of turning this backyard clay into this, a replica Native American bowl, and get it fired. Let's see what happens. I went to a construction site and I found this big chunk of dirt, which I think might be clay. Although I see a lot of gravel and stuff in it, kind of dirty. But it was really clear that this is light colored. There was some real dark colored topsoil kind of stuff there. Clearly is not clay, but this is hanging together kind of angular. So my goal here is to process it and see if we have anything worth working with. Well, what I have done is crushed a bunch of the clay. And so I'm just going to run it through a sifter, at least some of it, enough just to find out when you put some water together with it whether it turns into a workable clay or not. So and then this is what I've ended up with, and all I have to do is mix some water with that. And we'll see what we end up with. Okay, here we are with our possible clay. And let's put a little well in the middle. Add some water, mix it up. See if we get something that turns into clay or not. So you can see here that it is definitely clay. It has clay-like properties to it. It's not just plain old dirt. And I can feel some grit in it. So I think there may be some different kinds of tempered sand or something like that in there. So I think I'll try and get that separated out and just get a sense of how much stuff is in there. All right, another way you can tell sometimes what's kind of in your clay or mud or dirt or whatever you've got, but we're going to try and see if we can get it to sediment out. And so this is the ground up clay that I have. I'm going to stick it in a jar. And I have a clear jar. This is plastic, but I don't think it should make too much difference. Okay, so we have it in there, and now what I'm going to do is fill it with water. Leave a little bit of room in there. It's filled with water. And I'm going to shake it up. And so what I want to do is get all those particles suspended in there. And then we're just going to let it sit. The idea is that the heavy stuff like gravel, little rocks and gravel will settle to the bottom, and then the loam will be in the middle, and it's the, I think actually I'm going to put a little more water in. And the clay is the finest particles, the lightest weight particles. And so those should be most suspended in the water, and the last then to settle out. And hopefully, if this works right, we're going to see some sediment levels to it, or layers to it. So I'm just going to set this down, and we will come back to it in a little while and see what it looks like. Well, here is the outcome of the sedimentation of our clay. And it's not that easy to see, but obviously you can see here's where the water is. Water's up here. Here's clay. And I don't know if you can tell, but you can see some kind of layers. It's more granulated down here, smoother down here, up here. So I think what I need to do is find another way to kind of dry this out and see just how much grit there is on the bottom versus the clay that's on the top. Okay, to get a better look at the clay, I took this little bottle and cut the bottom off, and then took some of the sifted clay, mixed it with a lot of water, filled up the bottle. I had, actually the bottom of it was covered with a coffee filter. Then let the water drain out, and then we can look at a cross section of what the clay is like. And so let me show you that. Okay, this is the little puck that came out of the bottom of the jar. And so it's pretty easy to tell. You can see right here, this is the clean clay, and then down below, this is fine sand. So the question is, how clean is this clay? Is this the right amount of temper or not? And the more I look at it, it looks like maybe 30% or more temper, maybe 40%, and that gets to be a pretty high number. So it may be necessary then to levigate this clay and then add the temper back in. I have made 2 test pots. This one I added about 20% fine sand temper to it, and it just feels really coarse and it's not holding together that well. I really can't believe that's going to work out. Then I took this one here, and this is the sifted clay just mixed with water, no temper at all, and that felt a lot better. And so I'm going to let this dry and see what happens with it. This is the clay without any temper in it, and it does bend, but it does break as well. So it's not as plastic as you might like it to be, but it may work out. And it seems to me that you just have to be willing to do a little trial and error and some investigation. Sometimes these things work and sometimes they don't, but that's part of the fun of it. One more experiment that I can do is to look at the shrinkage rate, and I have clay that does not have any temper in it, a coil that's 2 inches long, and so I'll let it dry and we'll see just to what extent it shrinks, and that will tell us a little bit more about our clay. This is the 2-inch coil of clay. Once it is dried, it has shrunk 1/8 of an inch, and so in total the shrinkage is 6 or 7%, which does not seem too significant. I decided to dig a little deeper, so I separated the clay, the pure clay, and the sand, weighed it out, and as you can see, the clay is about 60% of the weight, sand about 40%, and that strikes me as too much sand probably. And I'm going to take some of the pure clay, mix up another batch, and so I have an 80-20 split, and see how that works with a test tile. Here are 3 samples from the firing of the yard clay. First of all, you can see that the color is kind of a yellowish orange, and this is what they start with. It's kind of that buff color, so they change color quite a bit in the firing. The difference between these 3 samples is the amount of temper. This was levigated clay with 20% temper added back in. This is the clay that was just sifted and then mixed up. It has roughly 40% temper, and this has even more. It has probably close to 60% temper. These 2 are weaker, not as strong pieces of pottery. This is definitely the way to go to levigate the clay, which is more work, and then to add back in 20% temper. But it has the best workability, the best plasticity, and the greatest strength with all of these clay samples. I am now at the last step of the backyard clay digging process. I've dug the clay, I've processed it, now I've made it into a sample bowl which I've painted. You can see it's kind of a greenish brown color, light brown, and so I'm going to get it fired today in my backyard. We'll cross our fingers and hopefully it will turn out. I'll show you the end result. This has been quite the process. Collected some local clay from a construction site, which is really similar to my backyard clay, and did a lot of testing to see if it was going to make sense. I did some test tiles, fired them, they turned out fine. Now I've made a pot, which I just showed you a little bit ago, and I fired it in my backyard. And you may ask, why do I even put temper back into that clay? Well, when you fire, either with wood or in this case I use charcoal, and I will show you another video fairly soon about that backyard firing, that puts a lot of stress on the pottery, and there's a lot of thermal shock, and so the temper helps with that situation. So this is what I ended up with. Started out kind of a buff color, now it's pretty much orange and has a good ring to it. It didn't break, I'm real happy about that. Has some hazing on the bottom. I kind of like the authenticity of that. So I'm happy, and it's nice to have a local clay that I can use and to have fun with. So it's a good beginning. So thanks very much for joining me today. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. But until next time, I wish you health and happiness, peace and love. Take care. Bye-bye.